Helen, thank you so much for being on the Hello Therapy podcast. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the invite because obviously I've followed you for a long time on social media, so it's lovely to actually meet you.
It is so lovely to meet you too. We are here to talk about your amazing new first book.
Yes.
When is it out? Is it out in a couple of weeks?
Out on the 16th of May. So
16th of May.
yeah,
Okay.
so not long at all.
Yeah. And so it's called Choose You. Do you want to show the beautiful book that is Choose You?
It's just here. I don't know if you can see that.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yes.
So choose
Lovely.
you, gentle words to help you heal and grow.
And I had the absolute privilege to get a copy to read for the podcast today. And I want to thank you for writing the book, because it's a book where I guess you'd put it in the self-help genre or category, but it's so much more than a self-help book. I mean, I don't think those words actually justify it. I think this type of book is really, really needed by people because it's so compassionately written and it takes you on a journey. And you talk about this idea of like self-work. And I'm really interested in your conceptualization of this idea of self-work. So what would you say that is?
It's a big question, isn't it? And self-work is out there a lot on social media. I think for me, firstly, thank you for your very kind words about my book. And I'm actually very pleased you mentioned it was a bit more than self-help, because I think that encapsulates what I think self-work is. Self-work is a much deeper understanding of yourself, with the advantage of having knowledge of the psychological theories that underpin why we are like we are. And it wasn't until I started doing my own work and training that I thought self-help is so much more than just understanding some self-help, self-care. We are a lot deeper than that, and it's having that knowledge at our fingertips that I so wish more people had at their fingertips. I think it's that.
Oh, and I'm really interested in like your journey in writing the book. So how did it come to be?
I think it's been a beautiful journey, actually. It's been a wonderful journey, and I feel like I want to start at the beginning, but I'm not quite sure where the beginning is.
Right.
Because I've changed as a person so much through this process. I wouldn't be here with this book without my online presence and my social media. My community there has been so supportive, so honest, so open, so transparent, so hungry and thirsty for more knowledge. And I suppose I've just kept pouring into that, my own experience, my own therapy experience, personal therapy, as well as my private practice, and bringing in the learning tools that I have myself that have transformed my own life. I often talk about myself being, as do my family, the pre-therapy Helen and the post-therapy Helen, two very different people. So it's bringing that to people. So obviously I was very fortunate, and I'm incredibly grateful that Penguin reached out to me on Instagram and said, I remember the night I was out, actually, and I remember the night and a DM came in from my editor saying, have you ever considered writing a book? Would you like to discuss with me? And you think, this is a hoax, this isn't real. And I hadn't thought about writing a therapy book, but we started to explore, and it just became a really natural thing I wanted to do. And here we are.
And here we are. And is there a particular reason that you chose the title Choose You? What's the story behind that, or what does it mean to you to choose you?
Gosh, I've thought about this over and over, because obviously it's a
I'm
chapter
sure.
in my book on choosing
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And it gets very mixed up with selfishness, doesn't it? But I
It does.
think I know, and what I'm trying to move towards is it's actually self-advocacy. It's
Mm.
meeting your own needs too. It's choosing you too. It's not neglecting yourself. We don't want our friends or our family to neglect themselves, but we seem to,
Mm.
well, particularly, and I'm sure you see as well in our therapy work, so much self-abandonment, so much
Yeah.
self-neglect, and lots of internal scripts tied up with, I can't be
Mm.
selfish, I can't be selfish.
Yeah.
So yes, that's the underpinning of it,
Okay.
I would say.
Mm. And for you, it would, in terms of you personally, does choosing you mean that, or does it mean something slightly different? Because for me, choosing me would be sort of fully accepting myself as I am, kind of warts and all.
Yeah,
Um, I I do a lot of self compassion focused therapy work, so that has been again for me transformative in terms of how I, the relationship that I have with myself.
yeah.
So is that something similar for you?
Definitely, and I have changed so much in this journey of choosing you. So my life has transformed. It looks nothing
Mm,
like my life did before I chose myself.
wow.
It looks very different. There's
Yeah.
a layer of self-acceptance that I never had before. There's a
Mm,
layer of that compassion towards myself. There's a layer of, I do matter and I do have needs, and caring for myself like someone I actually care about.
yeah.
And from there, you show up very differently. I might use my voice more. I might speak up for myself in that way. I might speak much more kindly to myself. Like if I'm
Mm,
having a bad day or something's gone wrong or I feel I've made a mistake, to not beat myself up about it, catch
yeah.
myself. What do I need in this moment? How can I choose me too in this moment?
Mm,
And the
mm,
trajectory of what then happens has completely shifted.
yeah. And that comes up a lot in my work with clients, as you say, that journey of shifting from always choosing everyone else, always, just thinking about everyone else and everyone
Mm,
else's needs, shifting
mm,
from that to, oh, hang on, like I am in this life of mine as well. And there can be that almost like a light bulb moment that happens for people where
mm.
they realize I am a person and this is my life and I can choose me.
Yes. And interestingly, before we came on camera today, before we started
Mm,
recording, I was saying one of the practices I do with my clients is a somatic exercise where when they're feeling very disconnected to themselves, not in a traumatic way, but just like they
mm,
don't know how to show up, or they've got their two in their head, is I get them to pat down their body. So
right.
literally cupping their hands and tapping down their body, down their legs, and literally feeling their form. Now, I learned
Mm,
this technique from Dr. Scott Leons in the States. He's the the founder of the Embody Lab, who I'm actually an ambassador for. I love their work.
mm,
And when I do that with clients, something shifts. They come out of their head and all their relating to other people and how they are in relation with those people to, I'm actually a person.
yeah.
And I get them then to explore the language that comes up there, and I feel stronger, empowered, I matter.
Mm,
Something shifts, and then we
yeah.
move with that shift.
Mm. And there are many amazing chapters in your book. I have a funny story where, so I read the book in a couple of days, in two sittings. So the first sitting was just curled up on my sofa under my blanket. I just felt very warm and cozy, and your words were just, they were just lovely. And then the next time was on two train journeys, and there was there was a moment where I kind of looked up, and there was a woman who was looking at me in a really, she had a really strange expression on her face. And I realized that what I'd been doing was nodding for about the last 10 minutes, just nodding along to what you were saying in the book. Because as a therapist, there were so many what I call therapy gold. There were so many statements and words and sentences that just made so much sense, and things that I say, you know, on a daily basis in therapy with clients. Did you intend for the book to be a bit like self therapy, or was it something else?
I've really been thinking about this actually as the book's getting more exposure at the moment, because it's shifting and changing the whole time. I remember listening to a podcast recently, and Gabor Mate was being interviewed about a book he'd written. And he said, we very often write the book that we need.
Yeah.
And I hadn't written Choose You with that as a layer, but I was nodding away to that because I was like,
Yeah.
yes, this is what I needed to learn. And this is what therapy and my training gave me. I want to be able to give that to other people. And through the process of the chapters and the order of them, there's hopefully a general calmness that will just wash over people and understanding. And so I wrote it more for that, hopefully inward understanding and caring about yourself more, and just releasing any blame you may have for your own behaviors, not to take responsibility, but not giving yourself blame as such. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think you're right about it is a journey in terms of the chapters and how you've structured it. Because I think you talk in the beginning about attachment, and I think the first chapter is about emotions, isn't it?
Yes,
And sort of what
yes,
they are, and nervous system functioning. And so you kind of lay the groundwork for that understanding of our brains, essentially, isn't it? And how that shows up. And then, of course, I mean, the attachment chapter was amazing. And we were talking about this before, weren't we? About just how, you know, it's so important for everyone to know about this concept of attachment and how that weaves through your life. You know, those very early relationships set the stage for your understanding and your expectations of others as well as yourself.
Hugely. And I think, you know, and I did put a caveat in that chapter that I know attachment theory is just one lens at which to look through.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. But I think it has a huge grounding in how we show up in our identity, a huge grounding. I mean, I nodded the whole way through my attachment lectures, you know, it
Yeah.
made sense. And I think
Yeah.
if it makes sense and it fits and it sits with you, it's worth exploring. Of course, many relationships can have an impact on our attachment as we get older. But I think there's real grounding in Bowlby's work that we can't ignore. We can't ignore. And I see it with
Yeah.
my own clients. You see it with your own clients. I even see it with my own children. And, you know, that's holding up the mirror to myself as well. As I said, you know, I think I might have said it before the recording. There's two Helens. There's pre-therapy Helen and there's post-therapy Helen. I have to admit that. I have to admit that.
Yeah. And I mean, in my own journey, I think, learning about attachment early on in my career, it just really helped me just understand myself as well as my clients moving forward. And I use it a lot in my work. I'm kind of constantly talking about what do we think about this idea of attachment, and how that's relating to the struggles that you're experiencing now. And sometimes, we only just sort of mention it and we don't go into it much depth. But a lot of the time, we really do go into it and try and understand what that means, particularly for the person's relationships, friendships, and romantic relationships
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about all relationships, not just our romantic relationships, our
Mm,
relationships with our friends, our children, our parents, our siblings. It weaves our bosses, it weaves through everything,
yeah.
doesn't it?
Hmm.
The people we meet in the street, how we show up, there's
Yeah.
a there's and obviously coming back to that working towards a secure sense of self, the fact that we can change, and I'm sure you've witnessed it, clients can change attachment styles,
Yeah.
all through that beautiful gift of reparenting, not
Mm,
as a blame for our own parents, but as a reparenting ourselves as an adult, is a huge. And I worked very hard on that attachment questionnaire quiz. That took me a very long time. I needed to get the
yeah.
right balance,
Mm,
so that people felt held when they were doing
yeah.
that questionnaire. Because I think particularly around attachment, I didn't want people reading it and feeling very alone in the moment,
Yeah.
because it can be very revealing work if you've never heard of it before.
Yeah. And I think that's the tricky thing, isn't it, as an author with this sort of book is, that it's there are going to be moments when people read this book where it's going to be painful as they have these kind of realizations and they start putting two and two together. And, you call it inner work or self work because you are going internally to think about your emotions, your experiences, your physical sensations, getting in touch with that. And that isn't easy, is it?
No, it's not easy. And that's why throughout the book I put those gentle notes to reader. I
Yeah.
just feel that they're so important, just to take a pause, reach out to those you trust, extend yourself compassion in that moment.
Hmm.
Something shifts when we gain more knowledge about ourselves. We do grow, and
100%.
sometimes it feels we go backwards, but sometimes we take those steps backwards to come forward.
Mm.
I witness
Yeah.
that a lot.
It's that idea, isn't it, of like healing isn't linear. It's not just like a straight line. It's all over the place. And I think what I love about the book is you you feel held because you've got at the beginning you've got a little box that is again just so lovely. And I kind of imagined you saying it to me as I was reading it because I'd caught one of your lives before that. I didn't know sort of what you sounded like,
Oh,
so I
no, I
had
don't
your
show up
voice.
much.
But it was lovely, that very you have a very soothing and calm tone and things. So there's a part in the beginning of the book that says, make sure that you put the book down sometimes and get support if you need to. This is difficult work sometimes. And then as you say, those gentle notes are lovely. Um, as well as you've got things like, I love the flow charts. There's a few flow
Oh,
charts in there, isn't there?
yeah,
Which is just really
hours.
clear. I'm sure it did. But no, I love those because they're very clear. And was it the one on, is there one on comparison? I can't quite remember where
Yes,
they're placed. Yeah,
yeah,
the comparison
yeah.
one. It's like, if this, then go here. And just that's what people need. They need that sort of gentle guidance. What do I do when this happens?
Yes, I did one for comparison and I did one for self-love. But what I did with them is that you work your way through and then you can go back to the beginning again with
Yeah.
a new set of
Mm,
information. So they're always usable.
Yeah.
So you can just keep repeating. If something else comes up, you can go back and go through the process again, and something new will be revealed. Every little life experience gives us something new, doesn't it?
It
And
does.
I think that's what I'm hoping people gain from the book, that they can think, oh, I've had a bad day, or something's gone wrong, or oh, I had this argument with someone, and just flick through and pick up a chapter that might just help in that moment. You don't have to read the whole book cover to cover.
Yeah.
It's quite chapter based, the way that I've broken the book down.
Yeah, so you can pick it up whenever you like and dip in and out, which I think is really helpful, isn't it? But also you've got so what have you got? Yeah, you've got sort of journal. You've got lots of journal prompts, which are lovely, and they're journal prompts for all like different things. Which again is really helpful. I mean, I'm a big fan of journaling, and I think it's incredibly therapeutic for people. So that alongside the gentle notes, and there's a few exercises in there as well, isn't it? Sort of breathing and visualizations.
Yes.
What's your favourite one?
I think it's a good question, actually. I was flicking through yesterday. I think, actually, I was really scared to pick the book up for a while in case I wanted to change something, but I was looking through it yesterday. And I think particularly I love the letting go meditation.
That's my favourite. Yeah.
Oh, really? I find it, I'm a big practitioner of meditating. I meditate every single day without fail. It has completely changed the way that I care for myself. So I don't think I miss a day. And I do guided meditations. No, I absolutely love them. Of a night, actually, to wind down before I go to sleep. So you're always going to bed, so you always have time to do a meditation, is what I say.
Yeah.
Just pop one on, and it makes you reflect and switch off. And I love writing meditations. So that letting go meditation I really enjoyed writing that, and the visualization aspect of it, of the water. And so yeah, I'm pleased you like that one too.
Yeah, no, that was my favourite one. And I think the letting go chapter was probably my favourite chapter, just because I've been having lots of conversations recently around, how do you go from a difficult childhood and all that entails, to sort of being able to heal from that and not let it really govern your adult life or your relationships in your adult life. And that's been a question, quite a consistent question that's shown up for my email subscribers who wanted to ask questions for the podcast. So the letting go chapter was just a really, again, like a beautiful like journey around literally how to do that, or guidance around how to do that.
I'm pleased it resonated with you. I think it's incredibly sad just how many people resonate with what you're talking about. And there's a sadness I hold for so many people around childhoods that weren't what they wanted them to be. And I think this taps into the concept of grief around what should have been. And it is a grieving process. And there's a whole layer of sadness there. And I think I talk about in the chapter about the only person, and I know this is really obvious when I say it out loud, but the only person suffering by the holding on is yourself. And how can you create a life that you enjoy now? And that's the work I do with my clients. So many clients, and I know you'll be aware of this, have unhealthy survival tools to numb and soothe the pain of those traumatic childhoods, that those survival tools they're still using in adulthood. And actually what therapy does, and choosing themselves, is enables them to make healthier choices. That learning to let go with compassion to yourself, but also, and I popped a post on this morning on Instagram that kind of I know resonated for people, and they were really activated in my comments, and I need to go back through, was about the expectation and the longing and wishing we have for other people to meet our needs or show up for us. And actually, when we, and I love the reason I put this chapter in, and it's for this, is the on understanding others chapter. Because when we actually create space to understand others' behavior, abilities, capacity to show up, their backgrounds, their upbringing, their frame of reference, suddenly it doesn't feel so personal. It's not you that was the problem. There's been a whole generation after generation after generation, and holding an awareness of that can be incredibly healing in the moment as a step to move forward.
But it's challenging though, right? Because as you say, quite rightly, there is a grieving process that happens when, certainly in therapy, when someone starts to have that deeper understanding for themselves and for their for the generational trauma and what's happened to their grandparents and grandparents. So they can have that awareness, but there's still the anger that their parents didn't take responsibility or didn't change anything. And that can be really, really difficult to experience as part of that process.
Yes. And I'm really glad you mentioned that. And that's why when I talk about emotions, about the chapter 1, actually, the emotions, about understanding our anger as a messenger. It's protecting us. It's trying to give us information. But with the somatic work I've done, what I now do with that anger is to take it out of cognitive. Where is it in your body? Give it context, shape, color. What's it doing? How can we almost give it room to hear it? Again, very difficult for some people.
Yeah.
But taking that space to notice, and then somatic practices to release that anger. And then in that moment, slowing the client down and saying, what do you notice now? And they notice a shift in their nervous system that feels, it's like, you know, those toys they use with children in therapy, the breathing ball that stretches out and out. Have you seen them? And your nervous system, when it's angry, is out here. It's so activated. There's no room, space for anything else other than anger. And what we start to do with somatic body work is just release that tension. And that in itself can give hope that change is possible for my clients. And it's building on that hope. And it reminds me, so it's a long answer now, but it reminds me of, and I mention it in the book actually, one of my early psychotherapy teachers, she said to me, or to us as a group, look for the clearing in the wood and then keep clearing it. So it's about something's working. It's working. Change is possible. So it's a process. It's never thinking that you can just have one therapy session, really angry about my childhood, one session of 50 minutes and, oh, I'm no longer angry. Sadly, that isn't what's going to happen. So it's that trusting of the process, hugely.
Yeah. And I think part of that is accepting that it is a process, because a lot of clients come to me and they want the quick fix, which makes sense because experiencing these very difficult feelings and emotions is hard, as well as the experiences that went before that caused those emotions. So you want to get rid of that. You want to move forward, but there is,
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's work to be done to get to that place. Did you write the book as is it like a precursor to therapy, do you think, or is it more of a adjunct, or I don't know, how do you see it?
I like that question. I think it goes alongside. I think it can be both.
Mm.
I think it can signpost you to getting more professional help. But I think for some people, they fear therapy. And I get that resistance. I really do. It's incredibly brave to reach out, to share your vulnerability, to say, I need help, particularly in our culture where we are supposed to, or historically, get on with it, and opening up space to share your vulnerabilities with a stranger is huge, isn't it? So I hope
Yes.
my book acts as a guide of what's possible in terms of healing.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who, particularly with complex traumas we've already talked about, and other trauma and PTSD, they will need more professional help. And those with diagnosed mental illnesses will need more professional help.
Mm.
So it's not ignoring that. It's not
Yeah.
a substitute for therapy at all. It's just, if you're interested, it gives you some information that you might be looking for. I talk about it in the beginning as being a tool, the entire book, for noticing what comes up in your life, noticing how you feel, notice your reactions. It's very much about noticing.
And that's the thing that I took away from the book, I think. And it's one of the sort of foundational aspects of my own therapy work, is helping people notice and observe their internal experiences, whether that's thoughts, feelings, physical
Yeah,
sensations. And I think you just weave that through the book so beautifully. It's in probably every page, this idea of notice, be
yeah,
curious,
yeah.
in a compassionate, non-judgmental way. And that's just so key, isn't it?
Hugely. And I'm glad you picked that up in the book, because I
Mm.
think when I first started therapy, I remember my therapist saying to me, what's come up for you this week? And I was like, everything. She's like, what hasn't? And
Yeah.
then just as you grow and learn, and particularly my work through, I've done a lot of work through Deb Dana in the States with the polyvagal theory, and her work with Stephen Porges. For those who don't know Deb Dana, she's actually the founder of, she coined the phrase glimmers, so the opposite of triggers. But, her work has been transformational in terms of understanding your reactions in your nervous system. So actually,
Mm.
if someone said to me now, what's come up? Very little, really, because if something has come up, I've given it meaning. It hasn't festered. It hasn't got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because it's been understood at a much smaller level.
And it's that giving space too, isn't it? That
Yeah.
is important. And I think if you are, I mean, I think it's amazing that you meditate every day. I wish I could do that. It takes a lot of discipline to do that. But yeah, like that affords you the opportunity, doesn't it, to give things space, to connect with yourself in that way.
Yes, and through the meditations I do, there's intention setting on them as well, in them as well. There's space for you as a person. And I think it takes, 25 minutes, 25 minutes of
Mm.
meditating every day. And the research into the transformation of your brain
Yeah.
is staggering. I cannot remember where the research resource is from. I can look into that another time and let you know. But the research has been staggering. I think it's something like, if you do, is it 56 sessions, I think, it changes those pathways in the brain. You offer yourself more compassion, kindness, understanding. I definitely feel calmer. Definitely feel calmer.
Yeah. So you're like a walking advert for meditation and mindfulness.
Oh, hugely. And I also know that when things feel a lot, and I look back to what's my self-care practice been like, and I talk about this in the book, very often when things feel overwhelming, I haven't been looking after myself as well. So it's just a reminder that actually make that the basic self-care for yourself a non-negotiable. You have more capacity to cope, much more capacity to cope.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about what your favorite chapter is. I'm sure that you've got an attachment to all of the chapters, obviously, but is there one that kind of stands out for you?
I like the way they all flow. I think they build on each other. But if I was to say, I mean, obviously the Choose You chapter at the end brings it all together.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to choose one, it would be on healing. And I think that chapter I really enjoyed writing. And I think that everyone deserves to heal. And everyone with the right environment, support, and help can literally transform their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself is a gift to yourself, but also others around you. And I say that if you heal, the ripple effect out onto the people around you, it actually is the crux of wider healing standing a chance. The work you do on yourself that inspires others, the work you do on yourself that allows you, or enables, as opposed to allow, enables you to show up from a healed place that can be present, to show up with a lens of compassion for others, to show up from a place where you know what it feels like to hurt, to heal, to touch the wounds. That others, if they can do that, they can come through. I have a funny story, and I'd love to talk to you about it as a psychologist, because I haven't fully analysed it yet, because it only happened this morning.
Okay.
But I know, and I maybe shouldn't be saying it on air, but I'd love to talk to you about it. I've started to analyse it. I have done a lot of work on myself over the last 5-6 years. Transformational. And I'm not going to go into my wounds on this podcast, but I have always been absolutely terrified of thunderstorms. Terrified. Would not be able to get out of bed to get a glass of water. Like shaking, like literally terrified. And it's something I have a little bit of, I use the word lightly, shame, misunderstanding, don't really understand myself. I'm a grown woman. I have 3 grown-up children. We had the most enormous storm last night, huge. Car alarms going off, lightning filling the bedroom. And I wanted to get up and embrace it. I had not 1 ounce of fear. And I can only say that it felt like my window of tolerance, and I know we haven't talked about that today, but my window of tolerance for capacity, for compassion to self, meant I wasn't activated. And it was transformational for me this morning. I'd love to know your thoughts, but I have always been terrified.
Yeah. That's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, the way that I immediately go to the 3 systems in terms of the compassion focused therapy idea of, we have a threat system in our brains, we have a soothing system in our brains, and we also have a drive system. And it sounds like previously, what had been paired with thunderstorms with threat system activation, right? Perhaps, as a child, it was, well, it is scary as a child, isn't it, to
Yeah,
have
of course.
thunderstorms. And somehow you've moved from threat system activation to in a more of a soothing system space. And I'm sure that you've done that through all of the work that you've done on yourself, but also that the meditation and the mindfulness, as you say, opening up that space, developing your soothing system so that when a threat does come up, you don't immediately go into threat system functioning. You can move into soothing. This is okay. I am safe.
Yeah,
I can ride this out. That kind of idea, right?
yeah, yeah. Thank you. I didn't mean to turn it into a therapy session, but thank you. But what I
No.
found, no, I wanted to ask you the question because it was staggering to me. And
Yeah.
it was just the fear response that was always activated just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. I didn't have any exposure therapy. It wasn't like, let's expose you to thunderstorms. You
Yeah.
know they aren't going to hurt you or harm you. It was just through my
Yeah.
own self-work, because you're right, of opening up that space for being able to soothe myself in a healthy way daily as a matter of a non-negotiable.
Yeah. And do you think it was more like, were you, again, opening that space, but in terms of like curiosity? Oh, here's a thunderstorm. Was it that sort of cognitive for you in that moment, or was
No,
it
no,
just that fear response just wasn't there?
hugely somatical. I mean, it literally was just,
Right.
I have no fear. I feel like I stand up and go to the window and watch and that at like
Yeah.
4 o'clock this morning, I'd hardly went back to sleep because I was just so amazed by this space that had been created from my own healing journey. And it reminds me of some of the client work I've done. And I'm not going to go into detail because some of the work is triggering for listeners. So I need to be very careful about what I'm saying. But lots of the choices that my clients have made as self-soothing choices that aren't healthy, I have a model I've only grown from experience where we don't talk about the soothing technique they use. We don't give it energy. We don't give it air. We don't give it room. What we do is work on the self. We work
Yeah.
on building tools, and something magical happens. They stop using the unhealthy self-soothing tool that they've always used. I've got one client in particular that has had this one self-soothing tool since she was 12. She's now 44. And she said, this is the first therapy I've had where I haven't spoken about it, and I'm no longer doing it. And I think there's weight in that, isn't there?
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? As you say, it's because therapy, you get what, 50 minutes? It's not that much time per week
No,
or every couple of weeks. And
no,
you do need to use it wisely in the sense of, yes, you need to explore what the problems are. But what you've described there is actually, instead of being problem focused, we're much more developing a different part of yourself. We're connecting yourself to yourself in a compassionate way that allows for something different, that allows for a different
yeah.
mode, a different way of
Mm,
functioning, of seeing the world, of being with yourself. And that's the
mm.
power, isn't it? That's the transformation.
That's yes, because what you're doing is moving into secure sense of self.
Yeah.
You're moving into understanding yourself, actually wanting to care for yourself. I mean, incredibly powerful is the inner child work, isn't it? Can be.
Yeah.
I don't do that with all my clients, but because it doesn't feel appropriate. But for some, it's really beneficial. And about caring for a part of you that perhaps didn't have that care before.
Yeah.
To look at the reason why we're using an unhealthy self-soothing tool when we could make healthier choices, and noticing how that healthier choice makes
Yeah.
you feel. Everything about bringing it back to the noticing, for sure.
noticing, and as you say, that awareness
Mm.
of yourself, and therefore the learning and the understanding and the compassion.
Always compassion, but so many people struggle with self-compassion, don't they? And I
They do.
understand why. You know, it's very vulnerable to give yourself softness where you have never ever been able to use softness as a survival tool. You can't. It's almost a
Yeah.
luxury. And that takes
Mm.
work. That takes work. So we can use that term and band it around as if, oh, just be compassionate to yourself. It's I'm not saying it's that easy. I know how hard it can be.
Mm. Yeah. Well, Helen, I could literally talk to you for hours about your book and about all of the. I've had such a great chat with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's honestly been such a pleasure. It's been really, really beautiful conversation, and you're a very calming host. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.